In that moment, I recognized him as not just the God who is the character on the pages of our storybook, but he is the God of the Bible who is alive and heard me.
How do you find and keep hope alive?
I will find hope in what Jesus Christ did for me.
Do we believe?
My hope is centered totally, completely in Him.
Do we trust?
I have hope today because of what Jesus did on the cross.
His hope doesn't change.
Hope is triumph in our triumph.
Hi, I'm Jeff from Mornings on the Light FM, and this is what hope sounds like. I'd like to introduce you to Izabella McMillon from Operation Christmas Child. Isabella, welcome. Thanks for joining me today.
So much for having me, Jeff.
Absolutely. So I think everybody has an idea of the Shoebox and Operation Christmas Child. It's wonderful to have you here to give us a personal kind of behind the scenes of what it's all about and what it means. If you would, tell us about your childhood and your background in Romania before you ever received your Operation Christmas Child shoebox.
I am originally from Romania. I was born and raised during communism in Romania. So when I was born, it was already communism, and that is all I knew growing up. And communism, just to give you a little bit of an idea, Jeff, it basically meant for us that every aspect of our life was controlled by the government. And when I say every aspect, literally, my mom and dad, when they got married, they received a letter from the government that told them where they're going to live for the rest of their lives,
Wow.
where they are going to work for the rest of their lives. They had no choices in that. And
Wow.
they were assigned to this small two-bedroom government-owned apartment in a nearby city where actually I spent the first 24 years of my life. And that's the only thing that we could do. You could not go against what the government told you to do. They assigned us to a grocery store where we could get our groceries on portion. They would tell us what kind of clothes we can wear. So 23 million people in the country would wear the same color coat every year,
Unreal.
the same make, because the idea was that you would never stand out. So communism wanted us to blend in and to obey. And then the biggest thing that they tried to control is to make sure that God's name was not known in our country. And so steeples, they did not have crosses on them. They removed them. Churches were not allowed. I never heard the name of God for many years growing up. We didn't go to church. Those things could cost your life. And so that was the environment we lived in. And my mom and dad, they did their best they could. My most vivid memories of mom and dad, just around our little kitchen table in our little two-bedroom apartment, strategizing night after night. How are they going to feed us the next day? How are they going to buy shoes for us? Because our feet were growing too fast. So they did the best they could, but it was a struggle throughout our childhood. And I'm grateful, looking back, that
Right.
I was a child who didn't understand all the implications of communism.
So, if I understand you correctly, then no exposure to the things of faith or the Bible or Christianity at all as a child.
It's correct. Saying the name of God out loud would literally cost your life. Having a Bible would cost your life. So that was the environment we lived in. So because of that, we didn't go to church. We didn't hear about God. But God in his providence, because he's a God who tells us in John 1:5 that the light shines in the darkness and the darkness cannot overcome it. And there's no government that can ever stop the gospel or our God from reaching into people's lives. He reached into our lives in a very unexpected way when I was 7 years old, when my brother and I found by accident a hidden Bible in the floorboard of our little government-owned two-bedroom apartment we were assigned to. And that is the first time that I heard about God as a 7-year-old.
Unbelievable. That's incredible. So, talk about then from that point as a child, how does an Operation Christmas Child shoebox show up in your life?
Yes, so it was a journey from there. When I was 7, we found the Bible and we got so excited. We were reading the stories and learning about God. But if I am honest, Jeff, we thought they were just really good stories. We didn't understand. Nobody was there to teach us that there is a big God behind these stories. But a brave classmate of mine, when I was 11 in the 5th grade, so this is about 4 years after we had been reading the Bible, he invites me to a little underground church that he has been attending. So that is how my brother and I started going to a little underground church when I was 11. It
Did your
was a
parents
little
know about
house.
this?
They did, and it took a long time to convince Dad to allow us to
I
go.
bet.
So
Wow.
long story behind it, but the story basically was if my brother went with me, I could go. And so my brother and I started going to this little underground church Saturday nights. We had to go there after dark. We received the schedule, what time to arrive. Everyone received a different time frame to arrive because we didn't want to draw attention from the outside world. But it was at this little church that the pastor, he basically just said story time for children. So it was under the pretense of story time for children. And it was about 12 of us kids. And it was indeed story time, like my friend promised. But what we didn't know is that what this pastor would do, he would arrive on Saturday evenings 4 hours before we did and spend 4 hours on his knees praying that God will use the stories he would read to us from the Bible without him explaining to us what he was reading. And so that was the environment at this small church. Even someone like me and my brother who came as newcomers, he didn't know if we would be spies who were built in by the government
Oh, wow.
or if we were newcomers. So he
Right.
had to treat it very carefully. But it was this pastor who took me and my brother under his wing, and he actually started discipling us. He allowed us to stay after everyone was gone on Saturday nights. And he told me I could ask him questions because I had a lot of questions for him. After 2 months we started going, I recognized the story he was reading to us, and I put it together that the story he was reading was in the book that is in the floorboard of our house. And so I got so excited, and I told him, I said, I think I have this book in my house. And so that is how this relationship for my brother and I and this pastor started, by him pulling us to the side, asking us about this book. So God used that for us to slowly be discipled by this amazing pastor who allowed me to ask questions. And one question that changed everything. I had a lot of questions for him, Jeff. I had so many
I can
questions.
imagine.
I wonder sometimes if he regretted opening that door. But I will never forget one question that changed everything. I was 13. This was about 2 years after we started going to this little underground church. And I went to him and I asked him, I said, can you please teach me how to pray? Now, what you need to understand, Jeff, is that in this little place, he could not do something like prayer with us. So I never heard someone pray. However, I've been reading about prayer in that little hidden Bible in the floorboard of our house. And I was wondering how it works. And he asked me why I wanted to pray. And I told him because it's cold outside and I don't like it. I never liked cold. And I told him, I said, the only way mom and dad would let us go outside and play in the cold, long winters after 5:30 when it's dark outside. We didn't have street lights. It was pitch dark after dark outside. And we didn't have electricity. So it was one of those that we had to go to bed at 5:30. And I was 13. I didn't want to go to bed at 5:30. But I knew that mom and dad would let us go outside and play if it snowed outside. So I wanted him to teach me how to pray because I wanted to pray for snow. So we
Pray
can
for
have some
snow.
fun that winter.
Right. Okay.
And he kind of chuckled, Jeff, like you did. And he said, Isabella, if anyone can give you snow, God is the one. Let me tell you how simple it is. You just talk to him like he's your best friend sitting right there next to you. You tell him what's on your heart, what's on your mind, and he will answer because God always answers prayers. But he also warned me that sometimes God's answers look differently than what we imagine. And his timing is almost every time different than what we imagine. And what I imagine is that by the next morning, he will give me fluffy white snow.
Right. Right.
But that is not what he did. He didn't actually answer my prayer, Jeff, for 3 months. And I was such a disappointed little girl because I just wanted to have proof that this God we had been reading about in this little hidden Bible in the floorboard of our house, he's more than just a character on the pages of a storybook, that he's a powerful God like my pastor has been telling me he is.
Mm.
And he was not coming through for me. And I will never forget, I gave him a deadline until Christmas. I told him he had until Christmas to prove to me that he's real. And it didn't snow on Christmas Day. And I was so disappointed, but it was the day after Christmas. And we saw people running on the streets. And in Romania, that meant one thing, there was something at the grocery store. And so as people are running, we started running as well. And we got excited. We were going to get something that we didn't have. And then we noticed they passed by the grocery store, but they still looked excited. So we followed them and we end up in the center of our little town. And people were shouting, trucks are coming, trucks are coming. And these three little trucks that were lit up pulled in. And they opened the backs of these trucks and they were filled with the most beautiful, colorfully wrapped shoeboxes we have ever seen. It was like a splash of color in our black and white world.
Wow.
And they started to give these boxes to the kids who were there. And this sweet lady comes up to me. She spoke my language. And she hands me this colorful little treasure. And she tells me that it's all mine and I don't have to do anything for it, which didn't make sense for us in our minds, where everything was with strings attached. There were no strings attached. And she told me that God loved me. And then she asked me if there was anything that she could pray with me for. And I thought, yes, actually there is. If you would pray with me for snow, that would be great. And that's exactly what she did. She prayed with me right there and then for snow and left me with this colorful treasure in my hands. And I remember opening it up and
how old were
Jeff,
you again?
I was 13.
13 at this
I
point.
was 13 years old. And can I just tell you, Jeff, that we did not hear kids giggling and laughing in Romania. That was not a normal sound that we were used to. But that day, standing out there with little colorful treasures in our hands, all the kids were laughing and giggling, and just the uncommon nature of that alone was so it's engraved in my mind, hearing still the sound of kids laughing. And I am excited with my little treasure in my hand and I'm opening it up and colorful things like I have never imagined before. Can I tell you, I was the coolest kid at school for a couple months with the coolest school supplies you have ever seen. Nobody ever had colored markers before, but I did. And I was so excited about every single item in that box. It smelled good and it was new and it was colorful. But then in the corner of my box was this little thing. I couldn't really tell what it was. And honestly, I was just holding it, trying to figure out what is this thing? And a little boy who is running past me with his box, so excited, he grabs my hand and he said, "You have to shake that. That's how that works." And when he did that, when I looked down in my hands, Jeff, I saw the most beautiful silver snow inside of a snow globe you can ever imagine. Just moments after this precious lady prayed with me that God would give me snow and he would fulfill the desires of my heart. And I knew in that moment that my pastor was right, that God doesn't always answer prayers in the way that we imagine it, but in the best way that is good for us. Because in that moment, I recognized him as not just the God who is the character on the pages of our storybook, but he is the God of the Bible who is alive and heard me. So that was a day for me when everything changed. And I decided that I will follow him for the rest of my life. And as a 13-year-old kid, boldly told him that I want to serve him and I want him to tell me how to serve him for the rest of my life.
That's an incredible impact, Isabella. I mean, obviously understanding the significance of getting something shiny and wonderful like a shoebox in a communist country where you have virtually nothing. But it's not just the material gift, how God had used the spiritual journey that you were already beginning to tie it in with the prayer request and the pastor and the woman who prayed with you. In that moment, you come to faith in Christ. You begin your Christian journey, it sounds like, as a direct result of a shoebox.
Absolutely. It changed the trajectory of my faith walk. That's really the way I look at it. When I look, and I wish I still had this snow globe. I had it for many, many years. It broke about 9 years ago. But I'm so grateful that God can take the most ordinary things, Jeff, and he can make something extraordinary out of it. You know, I think of that little snow globe. It was nothing special. It was plastic. I broke it about 9 years ago. And honestly, Jeff, they no longer even can go into shoeboxes. So
Oh,
our listeners who are listening, do not run out and buy all the snow globes in
yeah,
your area
that's good to
because
know.
they no longer can go in the
Okay.
boxes. But what I do know is that God can take the ordinary and make something extraordinary out of it. And that is the beauty of what we get to be part of when we do something as simple as pack shoeboxes with our children, with our church, with our life group, whoever it might be. Like how simple it is to change a life. And you never know what that one thing is going to be that God will use.
Oh, that's incredible. So tell us just for a moment about your role as an Operation Christmas Child project leader. Obviously, your story is powerful because you experienced what God does through the shoebox, but tell us about your role now.
No, Jeff, only in God's providence would I end up after speaking so boldly as a 13-year-old and say, God, use me wherever you see fit. And then now he has me here on this side of the shoebox. And now I serve full time with Operation Christmas Child and serve alongside of an incredible team of amazing people from all around the world who were impacted by Operation Christmas Child at some point in their lives. So I have a team of about 59 people across the country who are from all over the world. And Jeff, every one of them have their individual stories of how God used a simple shoebox gift to change their life deeply, but especially to install hope in their hearts in times when they felt unseen and forgotten by the world. But God showed them his goodness and that he sees them through something as simple as a shoebox. So how incredible is that God now is using me on this side of the shoebox so that I can encourage people and tell them it makes a difference. And all it takes from us is to take a simple shoebox gift, pack it, and pray that God will use it, because it's really becoming extraordinary once it reaches God's hands.
That's what hope sounds like.